What's going on, guys? We're back with another Sant Rant video. This is a continuation of my two-part series about the Season 8 script leaks and why I do believe them to be fake. If you have not seen the first part to this series, I highly recommend you go and watch that so this video will make sense. The link to that video will be down in the description. I want to say before we do, I will not be reading the entire scripts because they are rather long. So for time's sake, I will just pull out the most important pieces of evidence, in my opinion, that proves these scripts to be fake. And also one last thing to keep in mind when judging these scripts for yourself. Last year when Season 7 plots were leaked, it was like 2 to 3 sentences per episode, not the entire script. Also last year, HBO did everything they could to try and pull down those leaks, but these have been out since August 4th and HBO has done absolutely nothing. Season 8 hasn't even begun filming yet, so the likelihood of getting leaks is very small, especially leaks of this magnitude. Alright, let's get right into it. So the first scene in the 4th script tells us that Pike has been taken again by Theon Greyjoy and Jon's army, which visibly angers Euron. The reason I believe this is a piece of evidence is because if Theon Greyjoy all of a sudden becomes man enough to take back Pike and essentially breaks out of his Reek shell, why wouldn't they show that to us? They've been building his character arc ever since he was captured by Ramsay and escaped, and they won't show us the peak of his character arc? I mean, it kind of just doesn't really make sense. In the 3rd scene, Tyrion mentions that Daenerys is no longer safe at Dragonstone because the sellsword army that Cersei hired, aka the Golden Company, could come after her. I mean, she literally just got to Dragonstone at the start of this episode and is no longer safe. Why send her there in the first place? That is the most obvious setup for something to happen, which means that's very poor writing. Opening up in scene 6, Melisandre goes to Dragonstone, but in the episode before, she was headed up north and had told Arya and the Hound when she ran into them she did not fear the dead. So why would she all of a sudden flip a U-turn and go all the way back to Dragonstone? Also, it says that she tells Dany a sacrifice must be made and she points to Daenerys' stomach, implying her unborn child. But I mean, the whole time in Season 6, we see Melisandre kind of regretting and rethinking all that she did to Stannis, and then she's perfectly okay with going and killing another kid. Then later in the scene, Melisandre tells Varys that he is pretty much the prince that was promised, and I quote, she tells Varys that he should remember what the voice said in the flames. He should be the one to save the common people from the doom. She asks Varys to fulfill the prophecy and to save Westeros. End quote. I mean, come on, at this point it's pretty much been clarified that Jon is the prince that was promised, and then all of a sudden Varys is? That makes no sense at all, and would get such fan hate that it would just show that D&D have nothing left to write. This is one of the biggest reasons why I believe this to be fake. Anyways, moving on to the 7th scene, we see Theon at Pike and Euron rolls up with a captured Yara. After some talking, Theon notices that the air is getting colder and darker and he can start to see his breath. And then all of a sudden, a group of whites start invading Pike. But let's take a minute to look at the map here, and we will notice that Pike is an island, hence the name the Iron Islands. And last I checked, whites can't swim. You could also use the argument that the Night King or a group of White Walkers could have frozen a path over the water. However, there are no White Walkers in this scene. And even if they could freeze water like that, then they could have just come around the wall in the pilot episode in Season 1. Also, it says Euron kills Theon, which completely kills Theon's arc story. He takes back Pike off screen and then gets killed by Euron. D&D have been building his arc ever since the end of Season 5 when him and Sansa escaped. And then they just end it like that? I mean, come on. Moving on to the 5th episode, the script opens up at the Eyrie, and we see the Knights of the Vale start to prepare for an attack. A few seconds later, we see the storm coming and all the dead that come with it. But if we refer back to the map, the Lannister/Tully army are marching down to the Eyrie from Greywater Watch. But somehow, the White Walkers and the Undead army get to the Eyrie first, without even seeing the remaining living army. I mean, they should be crossing paths and they didn't even run into each other. So that geographically doesn't even make sense. Jumping into the third scene, Daenerys is preparing some defenses at Dragonstone because the Golden Company is on their way. Varys advises her to leave and she pretty much ignores it, but I mean, if she knew this massive force was on the way, why wouldn't she just take her and her army and leave? And then she starts to go into child labor. I get the timeline is all messed up at this point, but she just barely got pregnant about 4 episodes ago, and she's already going into labor. I mean, that timeline must be really messed up if that makes any sense at all. In the fourth scene, we see the Knights of the Vale pretty much getting slaughtered when Jon comes in riding on Drogon to save the day. So, Daenerys, the mother of dragons, who raised the dragons from the end of season 1 to like now, was kind of nervous her first time riding Drogon back in season 5. And it wasn't till really the end of season 6 did we see her confidently ride him into battle. And all of a sudden, we see Jon riding Drogon into battle against probably the toughest enemy of all time, also on a dragon. That doesn't really make sense because where would Jon have gotten these skills or confidence from? There is one thing I do really like about this scene, and that's Brienne's supposed death. Because when she dies, Jaime is there holding her in his arms, and she basically asks Jaime to fulfill her oath to Catelyn Stark and to protect the Stark sisters. And Jaime, of course, accepts it. But that all goes down the drain when Jaime dies in the next episode. So why would D&D make this big death scene with Brienne asking Jaime to keep the oath going and Jaime accepting for him to only die in the next episode? In scene 5, Arya and the Hound and Nymeria are walking in King's Landing. But I mean, the Hound is one of the most recognizable people in all of Westeros. Not to mention they have a full-grown direwolf with them, and no one raises a finger, no one even questions it. I mean, just because the Lannister army left with Jaime doesn't mean there aren't still gold cloaks walking around. In the 7th scene, we go back to the battle at the Eyrie, and it says Tyrion is leading his men very well. But we all know that Tyrion isn't a battle commander, and he's going against, like I said, one of the toughest enemies ever. So how did he just become this great Randall Tarly-like battle commander in one episode? I mean, come on. I just want to say I hate absolutely everything about the 8th scene because absolutely none of it makes sense. Daenerys pretty much dies from childbirth, which does not make sense at all. And I would like to see her die in more of a poetic justice type of way. I mean, she has been one of the main characters since the very first season. Like if Jon had to recreate Lightbringer by stabbing her in the heart to bring out the flaming sword. I think that would be poetic justice in a way, because Dany is known for delivering fire with her dragons and being immune to fire because she's a Targaryen, and the reason she has to die is to start the fire, aka Lightbringer, to defeat the Night King. I don't know. I think that might be cool. Or she dies saving Jon, or something like that. I don't know. But not dying from childbirth. And then it goes on to say that Varys is the one to stab her in the heart to put her out of her misery, to fulfill the prophecy. I mean, that's nothing like Varys, and that's nothing like D&D's writing in Game of Thrones, and that makes absolutely no sense. Going into scene 9, we see Arya kill Cersei and the Hound kill the Mountain, sort of. Two things that don't really make sense about Arya killing Cersei. One, it says Arya is wearing Qyburn's face, and somehow she knows that Daenerys has been defeated. Number two, if Arya is the one to kill Cersei, then what was the purpose of showing us Maggie the Frog back in season 5? Because everything in that prophecy has come true so far, except for the Valonqar, which is High Valyrian for little brother. The Valonqar is the one who's supposed to kill Cersei, and I could get into that, but I feel like that is a whole video within itself. Scene 13 is the naming of Euron as the King of the Seven Kingdoms, which makes absolutely no sense at all, but whatever, we will stick with it for now. And then it gives us a death list for the episode, and says that the Night King dies, but nowhere in the script before does it say he dies. the last thing it says about the Night King is he's trying to break inside the Eyrie with a group of White Walkers. And then he just doesn't get mentioned after that, so we're supposed to believe he died off screen. The thing Game of Thrones has been building since the very first scene in the TV show dies off screen. I don't think so. This was a huge indicator to me for this leak being fake. I mean, come on. The biggest villain dies off screen or doesn't even get mentioned after this? Alright, we made it to the last episode of Game of Thrones ever. So remember, this would have to be the best one ever. And whoever wrote this supposed leak sounds like they rushed it and wrote it in 3 minutes, because none of it makes sense and it is complete terrible writing. So scene 2 opens up with Daenerys' body hanging in King's Landing and people are throwing shit at it. Besides that being incredibly messed up even for Game of Thrones, I do not think D&D would ever do that to a character such as Daenerys, because that ruins her complete story. The last thing fans will remember her is a hanging corpse with shit being thrown at it. And then we see Arya and the Hound are at an alehouse in King's Landing. But don't you think that if they are sitting at an alehouse, which is a very public place in King's Landing, someone would notice the Hound, but no one seems to remember him. Scene 3 kicks off with the remaining good guys, and they're talking about how they're going to take down Euron, and Davos says they should attack them with everything they got, which does not sound like Davos at all. I mean, he's always been the one to say, you know, maybe we shouldn't go attack them right now, maybe we should wait, as shown when Stannis wanted to go attack Ramsay Bolton at Winterfell, but Davos said no, let's wait out the storm. And then we see Melisandre come into Dragonstone. But in the previous episode, it said she was gone from the series, but now she's back. Still not making sense. Scene 4 is probably the second worst scene in all of these scripts, because we see the attack on King's Landing and pretty much everyone dies. They're all in the dragon pit and Drogon starts to breathe fire at Euron's army and ignites wildfire that apparently is stored underneath the dragon pit. And Jon, Jaime, Jorah, the Hound, Euron, Drogon, and all of the Golden Company are blasted to bits. But how is that possible? In the books, wildfire can be ignited by sunlight, so that means it's extremely combustible. But in the TV show, every time we've ever seen wildfire get ignited, it's always because fire touched it. So how can dragon fire above ground ignite something in barrels underground? Also, killing off all the main characters in one place in one scene by the same exact way is not good script writing at all. Scene 5 is also terrible, but mostly because 0% of it makes sense. So going into scene 5, Arya is on a ship, and the captain asks her where she would want to go, and Arya responds with Valar Morghulis, which we all know is how she gets to the House of Black and White, which we all know is the place of the Faceless Men, and she starts heading east. But why would she want to become a Faceless Man again? I mean, after such a big deal of leaving, and Arya's whole story arc was her having to go to the edge of becoming no one to realize who she truly is, and then all of a sudden just goes back. Scene 6 is one of the biggest pieces of evidence, at least for me, that proves why this leak is fake, because we see Tyrion and Missandei in bed together, which is absolutely bogus. These two characters can barely make each other laugh, and now they have an intimate relationship. Don't even get me started on this last scene. Remember, this is the very, very, very last scene ever of Game of Thrones. And this is how whoever made this script up put it. I'm just going to read it to you guys, and you guys can decide how it makes you feel. Start quote. We end with a scene in the far, far north in the lands of always winter. A single White Walker rides to and brings the body of Bran Stark to an altar. Remember, the Night King stabbed Bran in episode 2. He stabbed him in the heart with dragonglass. He performs a certain ritual and Bran opens his eyes. They are bright blue. The White Walker puts a crown on Bran's head and the altar slowly changes into one of ice. Winter is coming. End quote. Okay, if we go back to episode 2, it says Bran was killed by White Walkers, not the Night King, because the Night King was riding Viserion fighting Rhaegal. Also, if the theory that if you kill the Night King, it kills all he created turns out to be true, how could there be one White Walker left? Well, that brings us to the end of today's video. There are some stuff I would like to see happen in the TV show from these scripts, but 99% of it I don't want to see at all because it's terrible writing and makes no sense. I hope I helped you realize that these scripts are indeed fake, and if you do disagree with me or agree with me, let me know down in the comment section. I want to hear what you have to say. If you enjoyed watching this video, hit that thumbs up, and if you really enjoyed watching this video, hit that subscribe button for more videos. Thank you for stopping by and watching my video. Alright guys, peace.